deep in the heart of Texas.
We're in the business of winning.
Don't bet against me.
I don't bet anyway.
Lose your life.
Hello, everyone. Michael Jordan fans are the best. And today we're going to be talking over the subject, can 80s and 90s players, or would they, be stars in the NBA today? Before we get into it, we have Prescription Rex up here at the top. I guess it's because you're sick. How you doing today?
You caught that one, huh?
Very hard to miss. No. Then we got Hookshot Drew, returning guest from the debate review last week. How are you doing from Superb Sports Media?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me on again, and I hope you feel better, Rex. And I'm really just excited to get started on this topic.
We've got more usual suspects, sports and fitness Rance Robin. How are you doing today?
Doing good, baby. Let's go, baby. Good to be back.
And we've got Nick, NMB Sports, at the bottom here. How are you?
Doing good. Let's get into it.
Awesome. So this is something that I started thinking about, particularly after the George Mikan debate, where Travis was talking about how these guys can compete. You guys good if Hoop God comes in here? I don't know if you guys are. He's asking to come on.
Don't
you
bother
guys
me.
good if we let him on? All right, I'm gonna let him on. All right, come jump in, Hoop God. I'm not gonna let anybody else in for now, but later on. But some of the things that people go and they talk about is that these guys from yesteryear can't compete with the guys of today. I personally think that's absolutely ridiculous. And I wanted to go around the panel and ask at all of you what you think. And I'm going to go by the numbers to see what you guys think about comparing MVPs at first before we bring it up to a more open discussion about if you think these MVPs, and I will compare them to more recent MVPs, if they are equal to or better than or worse than. How are you doing, Hoop God?
Hey, what's going on, gentlemen?
Not much, not much. So first off, I'll go around the horn with comparing the 1980 MVP to the 2000 MVP. Do y'all think that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar would be able to compete or be a star in today's NBA? And the 2000 MVP was Shaquille O'Neal. What do you think the difference is between them? And do you think that Kareem would be a star? Let's start with Hoop God.
So that's I actually like these type of discussions because the question that I will broach is Kareem is he gonna be afforded the same luxuries that Shaquille O'Neal was playing under? Now we're looking at the late 90s, 2000s. So that was a much more defensive minded era. And just from my perspective, Kareem, his skill set, I do feel like it would translate, seeing that not only did he have the hook shot, but he had a pretty diverse skill set with the up and unders. Kind of like that little low post jumper. Like in his younger stage, he had some pretty nice moves. Now, is he going to be linked up with a phenomenal phenom like a Kobe Bryant that can also assist him in creating offense for him to be that dynamic? But if I'm gonna just say the best case scenario, I would say yes, Kareem. He would give Shaq a challenge for that MVP in the 2000s.
Nick, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I essentially think any all-star or great from about any era can translate to any other era comparatively. So absolutely, I mean, he can get his own shot off. He's not an injury in terms of being a liability in that. Very durable, consistent, tough, agile. I mean, definitely Kareem could. I don't see why Shaq wouldn't either. So, yeah, that's largely my opinion. I mean, if you were an MVP, an all-star consistently and in one era, you'd probably translate just fine to another era.
What's your take, Robin?
So I'm confused here. What's the question? Are we asking if Kareem and Shaq could play in those eras, or are we asking if Kareem and Shaq would be MVPs in this era?
No, to clarify, I know the 2000s is a little bit farther away, but than the 2010s. But my question is would Kareem be a star from the 2000s on until the modern day? And do you think that he would be a better player than Shaq? And I'm just going down the line through MVPs down the line like that.
Well, I mean, absolutely Kareem would be a better player than Shaq because Kareem is a better player than Shaq. I mean, I don't think the eras have anything to do with it. Kareem is just a more skilled. You know, Dar, you talk about the better and the greater thing. To me, I think Kareem is a better and a greater basketball player than Shaquille O'Neal. You know, so I think Kareem would be better regardless of the eras. So for me, yeah, absolutely. Shaquille O'Neal, for me, I think he would be dominant. See, when we talk about these kinds of players, we're talking about, the top 10, 20 greatest players of all time. These guys are going to translate. However, for me, I don't believe that every player necessarily that's won an MVP in their eras, let's say, would win in another era, let's say. I think that could be something that you can talk about in terms of that's why I was saying, like, what are we saying here? Are we saying that, would Shaq win an MVP in the 90s? No, because he didn't win an MVP in the 90s. Would Shaq win an MVP in the 80s, or would he win an MVP in the 70s? I don't know if he wins an MVP in the 70s. You know what I'm saying? So we can say things like that, but are they going to be great players regardless? Yeah, I believe they'll be great players, but are they going to win MVPs? I don't know.
All right. What's your take, Drew?
Yeah, I think Kareem's just too transcendent to use him as an example. I think he would absolutely dominate, whether it was Shaq's era or our era. As the others have mentioned, he's far too skilled to not. To today's NBA, though, in 2024 NBA, that would be interesting. He would still dominate, but I personally would love to see how Kareem would blend his game, would transform his game to fit in today's NBA. But someone like Kareem, top 3 all time, there's no doubt about it that he would dominate in today's era or Shaq's era, especially Shaq's era where it was more defensive oriented. Guy averaged more than 3 blocks a game during that MVP season. So I don't think there's any doubt about it, especially pairing him with Kobe. It would have been really fun to watch, especially today with the high def that we have. But I think there's no doubt about it with Kareem.
Rex, what's your take?
My take is the exceptionally skilled 7'2" guy dominates anytime. In another 100 years, he'll still dominate.
Well said. All right. So, yeah, I agree. I think that Kareem would have a real opportunity to win more in the modern era. And I think he would be a star just with what he did, even being in his last MVP season in 1980. I still think that he would have been absolutely a monster in today's NBA and even the 2000s. And I kind of went and I kind of combined the two for more variety of players. But yeah, I think in today's NBA, Kareem would absolutely be a star. I know, Rex, you've brought up the whole the skyhook thing, that it wouldn't be as effective in today's NBA. However, I still think he would be a monster regardless of that. Let's ask another player, Dr. J. We'll start with you, Rex. Would Dr. J be a star in today's NBA? And in regards to 2001, do you think he would be able to compete with Allen Iverson? Again, it's a little bit farther back. But do you think that he would compete with Allen Iverson as the MVP in the modern day, the relative modern day NBA?
Oh, yeah, because once again, we're talking about one of the top athletes that's ever played the game. I mean, he was one of the original leapers, flyers, and that type of thing. And the game has just gone more to Dr. J's style. He would fit in more these, at the last 20 years because how they've opened up, loosened the rules of the game to allow for the athleticism to shine. Well, that was his dominance, was the athleticism. And people forget, once he got to the Sixers, and he had a big front line up there with him. He didn't do the rebounding that he did early in his career in the ABA. You know, I believe he averaged I think it was 15.7 rebounds a game as a rookie in the ABA, and he averaged over 20 rebounds a game in college. When you can get the ball and you can score at the rim, you're always going to have a place at the head of the table.
So, Damian, I might not be asking this question clear. It's kind of all encompassing with the MVP, but would they dominate today? I guess Rex is saying that he would dominate. So yeah, that's part of the question too. So I apologize if I'm not being clear. Drew, what's your take on Dr. J in comparison to Allen Iverson? Who would be more dominant? Who do you think would win MVP in today's year?
So okay, so all right, now I need to clear. So when you compare Allen Iverson, it's Allen Iverson 2001, Dr. J 1981, but in 2024 NBA, right?
Yeah, just in general.
Okay.
I'm doing the last 20 years because I'm going through the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, I got you. I'm on the same page now. I'm with Rex. I don't want to parrot everything Rex says, but a lot of the things he says I agree with. I think he would dominate even more in today's era. I think his not only his skill set but his athleticism lends itself to today's NBA. I think there's probably not an MVP from any era, well, more than 20 or 30 years ago that fits more with today's NBA than Dr. J. I mean, he had it all, and as he said, he kind of calmed down once he came to the NBA from the ABA because he didn't need to do as much. But the rebounding, the playmaking, all level scoring. I mean, everyone knows about his dunking and ability near the rim, but he could really score anywhere. And I don't really see any flaw in his game, at least from what I was able to watch. So I think he would take it over Allen. Allen Iverson was a spark plug who could just take over the game at any moment. But I mean, Dr. J was doing that at a time, when they forced a merger because of this guy. So no doubt about it.
What's your take, Robin?
Yeah, see, once again, man, when we're talking about Dr. J and Allen Iverson, man, there's no comparisons here, okay? No disrespect to Allen Iverson. He's not of the ilk of a Dr. Julius Erving. He's not on that level, man, okay? So those are something we have to understand from the beginning right here. We're talking about an iconic player in Dr. J and the icon of Allen Iverson. But to me, in this era, Dr. J would be sensational, man. Who has the swag of a Dr. J in this era right now? These guys in this era, they don't have the swag of someone of a Dr. J, man. This guy was class personified, the way he moved on the basketball court. Very few players in NBA's history have moved the way that Dr. J has moved on the court, captivated the people the way that Dr. J has, man. So when we talk about being successful in this era with the way they're marketed and things of this nature, Dr. J would absolutely be one of the most dominant figures in the media right now, man. The way that he played the game, and like I said, his swag and his marketability, man. This is not to take away from Allen Iverson's swag and his marketability because he's right up there in those kinds of categories. But it's the on-court game to go along with that Dr. J seals the deal and differentiates himself between someone like an Allen Iverson, man. So once again, you can clearly see the MVP from 2001 and the MVP from 1981, although they're MVPs in name, they're not necessarily on the same level. They're not necessarily in that same ilk, man.
What do you got to say, Nick?
Yeah, I was trying to think of who I would compare Dr. J to today stylistically, and John Morant kind of came to mind just in terms of another star. John Morant 6'2", 170, 180, right? Dr. J was like 6'7", 210, 220. In today's more open offense and spacing, I just think Dr. J would still crush it today. No problem with his athleticism and the way the game's wide open these days. Although the 70s was up and down a little bit too, but I think with the pace of play and everything, I think Dr. J would just run away with it, to be honest with you. I don't really see how any of his game doesn't translate to today. So I would definitely have to go Dr. J over AI as well.
All right, what you got to say, Hoop God?
I mean, I want to echo just about what all of you gentlemen were able to provide, especially what Rob gave as far as Dr. J being the ambassador of the league, because I think that gets overlooked. What I like about Dr. J, just real quick, I'm gonna get back to basketball, but just how he articulated himself, right? How he conducted himself. you never heard of anything negative, like any negative publicity dealing with Dr. J, seeing that the NBA could get behind him and let him represent their brand. To me, that's also like it's a testament to who he was and the impact he had on the game at that time. But getting back to basketball now, I come up in that era when Iverson had the crossover in the Braves. I was in junior high going to high school. So look, I know how to separate my love bias for Iverson and just get to being a better basketball player. Dr. J would be perfect for the 2000s or this modern era because number one, he was more efficient. He was not as ball dominant as Allen Iverson. Higher IQ, better decision maker. Because when you look at that squad that Allen Iverson had going to the finals, I really think they could have been a more complete team had Iverson's style of play allowed somebody else to create offense and be a playmaker. Like they literally were like, we're going to play defense. You put up the points. Yeah, that'll work. But when you get to the finals, somebody can key in on you, especially an elite team. But a guy like Dr. J, who can play, he can dominate in a team setting. I'm going to take that all day long. And again, I got mad love for AI, Bubba Chuck, the crossover, but if I got a decision between Dr. J and AI, I'm gonna take Dr. J, man.
Yeah, I take Dr. J too, and me being a Sixers fan, I on the opposite end do not have a lot of love for AI because I always thought that he could put more out there. Now I'm not saying I hate him, but I do personally think he's a little overrated. Great player. I mean, he went to the finals. He was an MVP and I think 4-time scoring title.
Hey, Dart. Quick question: Did you watch that sit down that him and Larry Brown had everything but the chip?
I haven't, but that sounds interesting.
Okay.
Now.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, I won't spoil it. I'll just let you watch it first because you hit on something that it kind of resonated with me. But I'll let you watch the docuseries first.
All right. But yeah, I would pick Dr. J over him too. Both Sixers legends. Both did a lot of great things for the league. But also with Dr. J, I don't know if he was totally the best league ambassador, trying to rip Larry Bird's throat out of his voice box out of his throat. But in general,
Yo,
yeah.
that's the 80s, baby. That was the 80s.
Hey, Dart, you got to tell the whole story. But Larry Bird kept telling me, he said, "All right, Doc, 42-6, Doc, 43-6,
Yeah.
Doc."
Yeah, that's a great picture too.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying he didn't antagonize him. I'm just saying that he did try to. He didn't rip it out of his throat, so I guess he didn't actually try to kill him. But yeah, no, I would still pick Dr. J. And it stinks because a lot of people overlook his ABA time, but he was dominated in the ABA, all-time great. They went to 4 finals in the NBA, I believe. Absolutely amazing. But yeah, I would pick Dr. J as well. I think he just did more in total than what Allen Iverson did. Let's start with Drew for the next guys. Moses Malone in comparison to Tim Duncan. Could Moses Malone compete for MVP? And who do you think would be more likely the MVP?
Well, okay. So I think Moses Malone would still definitely I think he would fit in this era. I think he has a couple of weaknesses that might be exposed in this era. And now when it comes to this might be the first one I flip on for a modern guy versus older guy. I think I would take Duncan over Malone in today's era. Now, if they're playing in Moses' era, then I think obviously Moses would run away with it. But Duncan's ability to space, get his teammates involved, play lockdown defense, not just on big men, but even sometimes switch on smaller guys and still get stops. Everything that Duncan was able to provide, being a cornerstone for a franchise, not needing to be the primary scorer. I would take Duncan over Malone in today's era specifically.
Robin?
Yeah, for me, once again, I think that when we talk about someone like a Tim Duncan or Moses Malone, this one's a little bit closer, I think, than the last couple of MVPs that we've talked about or compared. So for me, once again, with these guys, we're talking about the cream of the crop here, man, the top guys. So for me, the eras is irrelevant, whatever era they're playing in. And to me, I think Tim Duncan is the overall superior basketball player. So I don't think the era would matter for Tim Duncan as far as him being more dominant or winning an MVP over a Moses Malone. I think Moses Malone would be fantastic in this era. We think about the volume of 3-point shots that are thrown up. Moses Malone could live on the offensive rebounds in this era. I mean, my goodness, he could probably average 20 points a game, just offensive rebounds in this era, the way these guys chuck up shots. I mean, my goodness. So absolutely, his game would definitely translate to this era. And we think about Tim Duncan. I mean, my goodness, Tim Duncan, what doesn't he do good? I mean, everything he does is good or great. And the steadiness of Tim Duncan, to me, is what separates him from a lot of the all-time greats, the top guys, is Tim Duncan's level of greatness, such a high level on both sides of the ball that Moses Malone really can't touch Tim Duncan's defensive abilities when we talk about his effectiveness. So I think that Tim Duncan would absolutely be the MVP in this era or any era over Moses Malone. Not saying that Moses Malone isn't an all-time great player or right there. I think Tim Duncan is just that great when we talk about the consistency, his impact on winning, and we think about the consistency of the defensive impact that he had. I mean, I think the leadership, all those things, man. Tim Duncan.
Nick, what's your take?
Yeah, I go Duncan, but this does remind me of a point. I think me and Rex talked about this, how when it comes like to the Wilt or the Kareem and the Shaq, it was, do you want Kareem, who can probably translate in today's game better with him being able to run up and down the court, a little more finesse, or do you just go completely against the grain and say, I want the guy who plays opposite of everybody because no one else is really prepared for that, and someone like Shaq, right? So it's kind of, I think they're, in the revolution of the game, I think someone like a Moses or a Shaq, I think, is going to come in the league the next 5 or 10 years, and they're going to really bring back the inside out. I think it'll be a revolution to counteract, the outside shooting and stuff. So when I think about this, I mean, I just think Tim Duncan probably translates better today. I think his defense is much better. He's probably got a little better of an overall offensive game. I think he can play within a system a lot better than probably Moses can. Moses is just a bull in a china shop, essentially. And I mean that as a compliment. That's just how he played. So I'd probably still go Duncan, though. But I find it interesting thinking about some of these older players that I do think like this sort of, there will be a renaissance of the big man, I think, hopefully in the next 5 or 10 years in the post-up game. But for right now, I'd probably still go Tim Duncan, just overall. And his resume is second to none, essentially.
What do you say, Hoop God?
Oh yeah. Much like the Dr. J and Allen Iverson, Dr. J is a more complete player. That's what I always like to base it off of. And like Rob said, I mean, great players are going to be great no matter the era you put them in, but there is a separator. And this is another one. Like, I actually like this because I got love for Moses. It's the chairman of the boards, 444, but man, I am not taking him over Tim Duncan, Mr. Steady. And I'm going to give y'all some reasons why. I did a breakdown on Tim Duncan probably about a year ago when I started like researching. So this man never had a losing season. 19 consecutive seasons. That was his championship window. That's moving me. 3 championships in 3 different eras of basketball. 99 in that style, in that era. 3 in the 2000s in that style, in that era. And as soon as they moved to the 3 and D spacing and shooting, they win by a 15-point margin. I'm not gonna say who the culprit was he beat, but I'm just saying, like, when you look at Tim Duncan's career, no, it doesn't stand out. It's not flashy. You be like, oh, he's boring. Okay, but he's winning. So I'm not understanding what's the whole knock on him being boring or whatever. You look at him defensively, he was always the anchor. And I always tell people, these things don't show up on the stat sheet. When you got like a Bruce Bowen or a Steven Jackson, guys like that, right, they can play more aggressive on the perimeter because they know they got somebody on the back end that's going to clean up their mistakes. So I always tell people, if the defense starts with him and then they get on the offensive end and he can carry that team in 2003, which to me is a top 3 playoff run of all time, I'm like, come on, man, give this man his appropriate respect. If you're a Laker fan, I know you're biased. If you're a Celtics fan or whatever, like, I know you have a bias against this man. When I see people trying to rank him in the bottom 10, like, stop. Like, I'll listen to somebody saying top 5, but anything below it in there, like, nah, I'm not listening to that. So, and I got a choice to pick Moses Malone, Tim Duncan. In this era, I'm taking Duncan because of he's a more complete player. He can get everybody involved. He doesn't need to demand the ball, but he can give you whatever you need. If you need 15 rebounds or if you need 5 blocks, you need 25 points, he can give you that and chip in 6 or 7 assists. So give me Duncan in this discussion.
Rex, what's your take?
Well, in my opinion, Tim Duncan is the prototypical big man in NBA history. Really, no weak point. Just solid all the way around. Works well with all sorts of teammates. Responds to coaching. Durability. Just everything you ask for. Low ego. Just it's exactly what every coach wants. You know, the height, the strength, fundamentals, obviously. The thing with Moses that makes it so hard is I don't know if any of you actually know how Moses got famous at Petersburg High School
I don't.
in Virginia.
Hey, Ricks, didn't he play
Yeah.
pickup ball with the inmates?
Yeah. He was 6'9", 215, and nobody could keep him off the boards. If he wanted a rebound, he got it. They would bring in pro players to play with him. He'd play in the summer pro leagues as a teenager, and no one could keep him off the boards. He's quite possibly, effort-wise, the greatest rebounder that has ever lived. When he averaged 30 points a game in the NBA, he got more of his points off free throws and offensive rebounds than he did offset offensive plays ran for him. What I'm getting to, that type of effort is very uncommon. You talk about guys like, Rodman give that kind of effort, are famous for giving that kind of effort. And the production, what you got with Moses was the constant hustle, the never quit. You kept the other team's front line in foul trouble, and you kept the pressure on them to stay. They couldn't run. The other team could not get out and run because you had to keep at least 2 men under the board to secure the defensive rebound, or Moses was going to grab it. That's how he got famous. That's how he ended up going pro out of high school to the Utah Stars of the ABA, then to Buffalo, and then Houston in the NBA. So while Duncan is the far above, yes, absolutely, I think people are sleeping on Moses being able to succeed in this era because there is no, it's the whole contrarian thing that me and Nick had discussed. There is no one else like Moses today. And if Moses, young Moses, not Sixers Moses even, but Houston Moses of the late 70s was in the league today, every team would have to change their defensive assignments and how they play defense in a half-court set when playing his team. And now you're playing the other team's style of ball, not yours. And that makes every team less effective. Whether he would be an MVP candidate, that could possibly be a stretch. I can understand people saying no. I can understand people saying, well, possibly. He wouldn't be the obvious that Duncan is. But don't sleep on what Moses brought to the table because no one like him is playing today. And to throw that type of talent into the league would totally disrupt the norm.
Yeah, it would be a total system shock. Everyone would have to adjust.
No, I totally get what you're saying, Rex. For me, I'd have to pick Duncan, but yeah, Moses was a great player. And we're talking about Moses in 1982 and 1983 in comparison to Tim Duncan in 2002 and 2003. So I would still pick Duncan, even though both won back-to-back MVPs during that time. I'm not going to reiterate what everyone was saying, but just to the point of is that at that time, Duncan was an absolute monster. I mean, he was winning MVPs over Shaq, over Kobe was coming into his own, amongst other all-time great players during that time. Allen Iverson had just come from winning MVP with being a scoring title champion and just going to the finals. Yeah, I would pick Duncan. But yeah, Moses was great. I think he'd be able to compete. I just don't think he would be. I don't think he would beat out Tim Duncan though. All right, so the next one I'm gonna lump together Larry Bird or Kevin Garnett and Steve Nash. If you want to put it in order, and we will start with Robin on this. Who would win MVP? I would assume that everyone's going to say Larry Bird can compete.
Yeah, I was like, do we even need to do this? Yeah.
But who would you say would win out of those three for MVP during those years that they won MVP?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess that for the sake of, for this whole thing, we'll just say that I believe all three of these players would be successful in this era. I don't think we have to necessarily say, obviously, to me, Larry Bird's in a whole other class as far as Kevin Garnett and Steve Nash go, as far as competing their overall games and who would be an MVP candidate, in this era. But I think Steve Nash, for example, I mean, my goodness, he's probably like, damn, if I was like 10 years younger or, 15 years, if I would have came a little bit later in my career and played in this era, I mean, he would be having he'd only have to play like 60 games. You know what I'm saying? He really wouldn't be knocked for not playing any defense. In the era he came up in, defense was still being talked about and things of that. So Steve Nash was always knocked for his liability on the defensive end. These days, no one really knocks Steph Curry for not playing defense that much. Only the old school fans, the old heads, quote unquote, knocks someone like a Steph Curry. But Steve Nash in this era, think about James Harden. Are you kidding me? James Harden gives no effort on the defensive end. He has no skills to me compared to a Steve Nash. I would think Steve Nash is much more skilled handling the basketball. Because also in that era, they also called officiating a little bit more tighter than what they do in this era also. So for me, Steve Nash would be sensational in this era. My goodness, the amount of freedom he would have to dribble around on the court and shoot these shots. Oh my God, come on, man, stop it. And Kevin Garnett, once again, we're talking about Kevin Garnett, another guy who could do everything on the basketball court at a high level. Kevin Garnett's a playmaker. He plays defense at a high level, even though defense is not really, talked about or really pressed upon. Kevin Garnett can impact games on the defensive end. His intensity alone would put a lot of these guys to shame. These guys don't have the intensity or the heart or the hustle of Kevin Garnett, man. He would be out hustling a lot of these guys just off of effort alone. You know what I'm saying? Once again, and he would be out there doing his thing. His overall offensive game, he could post up players. Guys don't really have the post up game like that anymore. So for me, Kevin Garnett, his rebounding ability, all these things, I think they would all be great players in this era. And Larry Bird, we don't even have to talk about Larry Bird, man. I'm not even going to talk about Larry Bird. Larry Bird would be fine in any era. Larry Bird has been undervalued and so completely because he's wearing short shorts. They say that he wears short shorts, so that somehow impacts his overall game. Larry Bird would be just fine, guys.
It makes it easier with short shorts.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Nick, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, this one's actually kind of interesting in what I thought about it. Obviously, I like Larry Bird the most out of those three. But to what Robin was saying, to try and put the players in today, Nash might actually have the best argument, with the open floor. And he famously said he wished he would have shot more threes in his career, the way he sees the game that's played now. So if he took that mentality to today, I mean, who knows? Maybe he's averaging 30 and 15, I mean, it'd be crazy to think about, but it's not totally out of the realm of possibility that he might do something like that. So, I mean, obviously for me, it's Bird. I think he has the case for the best all-around game of any player, size for size, pound for pound that's ever played. So, I mean, obviously I think Bird's the best of those three, but putting them in today's game, Nash might actually have the best argument. That's probably, I might be in the minority with that, but seeing how it's so skewed towards offense, like Robin was saying, and his defense wouldn't get picked apart probably as much as it did when he played, Nash might actually have a case that he might be the best player stats-wise in today's game, right? I mean, him and Bird also part of the 50-40-90 club, right? So that one's actually a little more interesting and closer than what I thought when I first heard it. But I got to go Bird. I think he's got the best game of the three overall. Garnett was my second favorite player to watch outside of Dirk or a Maverick when I was coming up. So I love KG. I loved his intensity. He's a little crazy, which I kind of liked. That was the reputation he had. talking to himself and whatnot. So it's close, but I'd probably have to say Bird and Nash, I think, might have a slight edge on KG in terms of today's league, right? So, but again, it's close. But yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it.
All right, Hoop God, I'm going to use the bathroom if just Rex pick up from Hoop God if I'm not back in time.
Okay. Yeah, like so Nick was saying, I do believe that like this era would be better suited for Nash, seeing that they both are part of the 50, 40, 90 club, and this era where you can't play any defense, you can't touch anybody. I mean, you pretty much got free range to the basket. So I would actually like to see how Steve Nash would fare. And to digress, another guy that he just seems to get overlooked a lot is Mark Price. I think he would be perfect in this area as well. But I won't get too far into that. Steve Nash, when I went back and was just like looking, what he did with that Phoenix Suns team was phenomenal. So I have to give him all the due credit in the world for that. KG, another guy that I'm like, I like his style of play. I like the psychological games he played on people, coming out there being super intense and the hustle. Like, to me, KG embodies a lot of the stuff that don't show up on the stat sheets. Because I think people, like when I'm in other platforms, they always want to talk about points, assists, rebounds, yada, yada, yada. But I'm like, okay, can you give me something outside the stat sheets? Can you give me something like intangibles, like in leadership? Can you give me that type of stuff? And it's like they have a deer in the headlights look like, okay, so you don't know anything besides the stats there on Basketball Reference or whatever. But when I get to Bird, I'm looking at Bird like this guy was a double-digit rebounder for his career, right? Not only that, but he was 50, 40, 90, and he really didn't start shooting the three until what, like 1983, 84, because his first couple of years he was at the power forward position. So I'm looking at all these variables at play, and I'm like, okay, well, Larry Bird, this era, you can't touch him, free range to the basket, not going to dominate. And I mean, he can handle like a guard. He can also shoot like a two guard. And I mean, everything that Larry Bird possesses is perfect for this era. So yeah, I'm taking Bird.
Rex, what do you got to say?
All right, well, Who God slipped in the Mark Price reference on me before I could. Thanks a lot for stealing my thunder.
My bad, Rich.
Well, I think of any player from back in that era that was a very good player, that this era he would be a great player. More than any other player from that era, I think his stock would rise more than any other. But about these three, to me, Kevin Garnett, to me, has always been that glue guy player with all-time great ability. He's the most talented glue guy in NBA history. For those old heads that know what a glue guy is, what Hugo was just talking about, the guy that keeps everyone together, leads in the locker room, leads you out on the court, will take the responsibility, take the heat, to protect teammates, that type of thing. I always thought that KG had that. He was totally that guy. But of all the guys in NBA history that played like that, he is the most talented one. Mm-hmm. The problem with him today, I think, would be his emotions and how the game is officiated as far as texts are these days, how ridiculous they get with some of these officials, with some of these calls. KG, I think, would really struggle some nights. Obviously, 8 out of 10 nights, he'd still be KG. But when you're talking about an MVP, about being able to win the MVP again, I think that might just be enough of a hindrance to put someone over him, because he'd have that as is seen today as bad publicity, getting tossed. Because I actually officiated a KG game in high school, and he is every bit as crazy as what his image makes out. When it comes to Nash really was like the modern point guard, right? I mean, what guys are now, the top point guards in the NBA now, isn't that really what Nash was the first of? But the ones now maybe higher on the higher athletically, but not quite as skilled with the ball as he was, like the 50, 40, 90. So it would be right in his ballpark, but we're starting to get a dearth of that kind of player. So I'm not sure exactly how much he would stand out.
That's a good point.
It's and being MVP means standing out. I'm not talking about whether they'd be great or whether they'd be all-stars. I'm talking specifically the MVP award. Bird, the advantage to Bird is really when you look at the modern guys, he's Jokic and Doncic, right? He's right in the middle. He's bigger than one, not as big as the other. Kind of plays like both. It's funny that a country boy from, in southern Indiana who grew up in the 70s really is almost almost you'd say the ancestor of the modern NBA MVP. I mean, when they're all foreign players are winning the award now. Most of the guys at the top of the league are foreign or European for the most part, and they play that all-around offensive game. They're slow-footed defensively, but because of the defensive rules of these days, it really doesn't hinder you. So I just think it's funny that when you look at Jokic, who's won a championship and is it 2 MVPs, possibly going for a third? I know some people say he got robbed. When you look at Doncic and how fast he's 10,000 points in 6 years and in his type of one-up game, I mean, really, both of them, if either one admitted that they patterned their game entirely after Larry Bird, there's no one that would doubt that, right? I mean, that's really what their games look like. And they're the best in the modern game. And Bird was the best 40 years ago. It just shows you that the game really hasn't changed. The only thing that has changed are the rules makers of the NBA and trying to fine-tune the product that they're putting on the court. The game really hasn't changed.
Yeah. Drew, what's your thoughts? Who would Bird or the other guys?
Well, I mean, these guys have pretty much covered all the points I would have made. I mean, out of all the ones we've done so far, these are the closest. The Bird being in there kind of muddies up everything because it's just like you got Nash, you got Garnett, and then Bird, and just kind of tips the scales. But all three of these guys, I think, would have made it in the modern era. I think Rex brought up a point I didn't consider, which is Garnett's being kind of a hothead would, tee him out. He'd be teed out a lot. But I think that when it comes to Nash versus Bird, they're both really good examples of what a modern player would look like, especially Bird. I mean, the guy was, 30, 40 years ahead of his time. But I think Bird's size advantage, being still the only 2010 5 guy there ever was, I think it still has to go to him. I mean, Nash was a bit undersized. We see guys like Nash all the time. I think he's still very similar to CP3. And we know what CP3's career has gone like. So, I think it's not really close. It would be close if it wasn't Bird. Like if this is Moses Malone versus Steve Nash and Kevin Garnett, okay, now you have something there. But with Bird being in there, it kind of just tips the scales to just being Bird. But for all the reasons the others have said, I'm not going to go into all of them. It's Bird and pretty much Nash, but Garnett would absolutely fit in this NBA. I mean, it wasn't that long ago he was here. Yes, it's become more of a spaced out 3 type shooting league, but I don't really think Garnett would have any trouble, especially with his leadership, the electricity he brought to the court, the energy. I mean, it would be infectious. His entire team would feel that, and I think that side of him would be much needed in today's game. I mean, his attitude absolutely fits the modern NBA to me.
Yeah, I would have to say Bird over those 2 other guys. I think Bird, skill-wise, is even. I think the next closest guy would be Garnett out of those 3. Obviously, all those guys are great players, but I think Bird would take the cake in totality over both of those guys. Again, not to go into everything, but I thought there were a lot of great points said. The next couple guys we're going to get into, we're going to start with Nick. Who would win? Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, or your guy, Dirk Nowitzki?
Dirk Nowitzki, next question. I mean, what were they again? Michael, Dirk,
Kobe and Magic.
Kobe, and Magic. Wow, that's a hard one. I kind of have to leave my guy fourth there, unfortunately.
Wait, say that again, Dark.
Magic, Michael, Dirk, and Kobe.
You know, I obviously Michael is number one. I mean, we can put that to bed. I probably would, man. I probably with today's shooting, I probably would give Kobe an edge over Magic. Though I don't know if that's surprising or not. I think his two-way ability, defense and offense. I think being able to shoot the ball and create his own shot a lot better than Magic, I think would translate a little better to today's game. Again, I think Magic does get a little overhated for his shooting. I don't think he was that bad of a shooter, but again, when you talk about creating your own shot and pulling up off the dribble and things like that, I mean, obviously Kobe has that in spades over Magic. So I probably would have to go Jordan, Kobe, Magic, Dirk in that order. Magic and Kobe are very close. Just kind of depends on how you want to play. I just think Kobe's overall game probably translates a little better. I think Magic, yes, he can create. He also needs, a certain system and vibe a little bit more than what Kobe does. I think Kobe, you can kind of just stick in anywhere and he'll do his thing. I think for Magic to truly reach his true pinnacle, he has to have some things in place there, like anyone else, right? But I'd probably have to go that order. I'd probably have to go Michael, Kobe, Magic, and then Dirk. Dirk, a very close fourth.
Hoop God, what's your take?
Okay, so yeah, I mean it's MJ number one, not arguing that. But then when we get to Kobe, Magic, and then Dirk, and Nick, it's not a knock because I love Dirk. Okay,
I put him fourth too, so it's all right.
Yeah, that playoff run, I got him up there, but I'm gonna have to. It's gonna come down to Kobe and Magic. Okay, now this is how I'm gonna give my perspective on this. Magic brought a winning impact from high school, college, NBA. In a 4-year span, he was a 3-time champion on 3 levels of basketball. So he won in high school. He goes to college. His second year, they win the chip, and then he's a rookie, and they go to the NBA Finals. He fills in for Kareem, wins Finals MVP. Boom, you got it, right? Now, Kobe, on the other hand, had a different path because he had to play behind Nick Van Exel and Eddie Jones. He had to prove himself, incrementally prove himself to be worthy of that starting spot. So I'm going to take Magic slightly just because of him being the orchestrator, getting everybody involved. And something else I found out a while back, Magic actually shot above the league average for three-pointers. Now, granted, in that era, I know the three-point percentage was relatively lower. However, when Magic's shooting above the three-point percentage, because I want to say his three-point percentage is about 34, 33, somewhere in there roughly. And Larry Bird's like 37, not to digress. So they actually shot over league average for 3, and then they were great free throw shooters. So was Kobe. I want to knock him. One thing I noticed about Kobe, he's one of my favorite players, but if you can get the right defensive system like around him, like the Detroit Pistons, for example, in 2004, you can potentially get him out of his game. Now, Magic, on the other hand, I know he had his shortcomings in the finals, but he came back and resurrected that. And with him being the floor general of the team, getting everybody involved, I'm going to take that on its face to lead my team versus Kobe, who he can get on that hot streak, but then it's kind of like, all right, Kobe, yeah, you giving us 40, but bruh, everybody else is kind of suffering over here now. Granted, if that's what the team needs, if they need to do that to win, got it. But if I also need somebody to get everybody else going, like James Worthy and Byron Scott, Michael Cooper, in a more team aspect, I'm going to gear more towards Magic, because Kobe also showed that he could display that in those championship runs. It surprised me that he led them in assists. If I would have never researched it and just went off of what the media was telling me, I'd have been like, oh, yeah, well, Shaq led him in assist and scoring. it kind of was blowing my mind that Kobe led him in assists. And I'm like, okay, well, clearly Kobe can distribute and play the point guard when they need him to, but just a traditional point, a positionless player, a more complete player, I'll take Magic in that sense. Now on the defensive side, that's where he's gonna, give me some problems because I think Magic does have 2 steals titles, but if I just need a guy that can go out there and just lock you down and hound you,
I think it's 3,
from
right?
3, okay. So if I need a guy, right? Oh, it's 2, okay. But if I need a guy that can lock you down and hound you on that defensive side, then you cannot. I mean, MJ and Kobe, those are like the top tier dogs. You're talking about just some wolves out there that want to just take your throat out. You can't go wrong with any of those guys. But if I had to choose, it's going to be MJ, Magic, slightly over Kobe, and then Dirk slightly behind those guys.
All right, Rex, what do you got to say?
All 4 of them are capable of it, obviously. But if they were to be playing in a modern game to like vie for the MVP today, I mean, the first answer is always going to be Jordan because he's the beauty queen, right? It's like when you just close your eyes and imagine what you want your MVP to be able to do, he did it. He fit that bill. So, we've already had the show about how many could he have possibly had, and 7 or 8 would not have been out of the realm of possibility or expectation if he hadn't have retired. But I think Magic is a lot closer to him than people think. Magic, if he played today, would not be playing Showtime Laker point guard. He would be playing more of the point forward, and he'd have 2 3-point shooters out there with him, and he'd be high posting. And so essentially he would be a mobile Jokic who could finish at the rim. So I think Magic would be a lot closer to Jordan than people think, because of those 4, he's the only one where his game would actually change because of the modern rules and how the game is gone. He was 6'9", playing out on the perimeter against a Ja Morant and those guys. He's at more of a liability being slower and taller. We saw with Ben Simmons how he was exposed once they figured out his game. That's why Magic has 2 steals titles. They were his first 2 years in the league, because the other point guards, the little 6'2", 6'3" point guards, had no idea how to play against him. And they were making a lot of turnovers because being covered by a guy 6'9" with those arms. He got a lot of steals. Then the league started to figure out how to defend Magic and how to play offense against Magic, and there were no more steals titles. The modern way to prevent that is he just wouldn't be playing the traditional point guard. He would be a point forward with 2 3-point shooters. And he would be insanely effective. But to be able to be out a prime Jordan, that's a lot to ask.
All right, Drew, what's your take?
Well, I mean, it's very similar to the Bird one. It's kind of loaded when you throw Jordan in the equation, because it's just like, all right, well, we're arguing for number 2 at this point, right? I want to say Magic just to break up the Jordan being number 1 and everything, but it really doesn't. It doesn't really. It wouldn't make sense. I would only be doing it to get attention, to put Magic over Jordan. But for the same reasons that Rex said, I like Magic in today's NBA because he doesn't have to play the traditional point guard spot. And then to what Hoop God said earlier, his last year playing, when he was gone for a while and came back out of retirement from HIV to play, he had a 3-point shot. He could shoot. He shot over 38%. So he had a shot. He wouldn't be having to play the way he was with the Lakers when he had, all these guys around him, like Kareem, for instance, where that's always going to change his game, playing with someone like Kareem. So it's I like Magic a lot. I would honestly would love to see what that would look like, because he could be playing the 4 spot, he could play a 3 spot, he could play anything really and still do very well. I mean, he played the 5 spot in the finals, so I would love to see what Magic can bring. He has more of a shot than people want to admit. one of the greatest passers, probably the greatest passer of all time, and that would be super helpful in today's league. Imagine him running the floor and he's eyeballing somebody, and he just suddenly fires a pass to the corner for a three. I mean, you're going to see that play 5, 6, 7, 8 times a game with Magic on the floor. So the amount of just setting up, I mean, he could easily average 15, 20 assists in today's NBA, I would say. So I'd love to see what Magic could do. I'm going to put Magic number 2. Kobe's game is so similar to Jordan's that, I mean, you could even have a solid argument for him being number 2 as well. And then Dirk Nowitzki being a 7-foot 3-point shooter. We see what Karl Anthony Towns is doing today, but Nowitzki was, to me, a bit better on both ends than Karl Anthony Towns. So yeah, I'm gonna take Jordan, obviously, but Magic, I would be more curious to see what Magic would look like in today's NBA than I would Jordan, because Jordan's gonna do what Jordan's gonna do, and they're not gonna be able to stop him. But I think seeing how Magic would adjust his game to today's NBA would be more interesting.
All right, Robin.
Well said.
Yeah, see, so once again, man, this is what I'm talking about here. All these players that we're talking about, they'll be able to be successful in all these eras. In this current era, they'll be successful. However, the difference is, as we can see, as we've done this, what's the pattern here that we've noticed? We've talked about a lot of these players from more recent eras, and we've compared them to guys in the past. And what we've noticed here is that these more current players, I don't think a lot of these guys would have won MVPs in other eras. That's what we're starting to notice here. Guys like Dirk Nowitzki, no disrespect to Dirk Nowitzki, but he's not of the ilk of some of the guys that we're mentioning. Steve Nash, no disrespect to Steve Nash, but once again, he's not of the ilk of a lot of the guys that we're mentioning here. Kevin Garnett, no disrespect to him either. He's not of the ilk of a lot of the guys that we've mentioned here. Also, so we must think about these things. When we've mentioned guys like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Dr. J, these names, these are guys who people consider top 10 players in NBA's history at worst. The only guy that we've mentioned so far of this current or more current era is Tim Duncan, who really deserves to be in these conversations. He's really the only guy. And now we've mentioned Kobe Bryant here on this list. So what we've seen here is that no doubt these players would be successful, but they would not be MVP caliber players in other eras, in my opinion. And I think that's clear as day as we've gone through this list now, and we've seen several players here. So absolutely, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Dirk Nowitzki, these guys will be successful in this era. Magic Johnson, they'll be successful in this era. And like you guys stated, in different ways. Because as we've stated, with the rule changes of the league, and we talk about guys' lack of effort. I don't know how many times I've talked about the lack of effort by a lot of these guys, man. The hustle of these guys. When we talk about some of these past players, a lot of these guys, like a Larry Bird, for example, he was known for his grit. That's what he was known for being a grit guy, for having that level of toughness, that level of hustle. These guys maximize their careers. Moses Malone, Rex talking about the amount of effort he gives. This is the X factor for a lot of these older generation type players that we don't see from a lot of these players today that's going to separate them. Magic Johnson's going to give the effort. These guys are going to give the effort. They're going to be successful. But to what degree is what we're seeing. Some of the players are not going to be on the level. So all these guys would be successful. Michael Jordan, of course, man, the work ethic of these guys, to put the work in practice, their overall games. To me, someone like a Kobe Bryant, the problem for Kobe Bryant has never been the on-court skill per se or what he does. To me, it's always been the mind. It's been the gift and the curse for Kobe Bryant. That's been the problem for him. It's always been his mind. He doesn't know when to pull back. So he'll take these bad shots from time to time. He'll overdo it sometimes and sometimes put himself in bad positions. So it won't necessarily be him having to do it in this era because these guys can't touch you or play any kind of defense of that nature. So it would change his mindset. So all these guys would be different, man, but they would all be great.
Yeah, I agree with that. So this is all we're about to finish up the 80s, and I think it's clear with the 80s, at least in comparison to the 2000s, which is I wouldn't necessarily classify it as the modern era. However, LeBron has played in it, so there's some sort of continuity versus some of the stars, although he's really the last one that's still on top of the league. But we're starting to get into 2010s now. And I think there's going to be even a bigger disparity between the guys of the 90s versus the guys of the 2010s, but that remains to be seen. To answer this question, I've got Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Kobe, and then Dirk. Magic Johnson even in these years, because he went back to back for MVPs, the next year. But what I'm getting at is that Magic was an absolute monster, and I'm not going to reiterate what you guys were saying, but I think that his game would translate well. Michael Jordan, I think, is obvious. I do like Kobe. I just think that his skill set in comparison to his success outside of being paired with Shaq, and it still counts. I'm not saying it doesn't count. I still have him as a top 10 guy, but I have him. I rate him lower than those two guys. And Dirk, he's probably sorry, Nick. He's probably
okay. Sorry.
He's,
It's okay.
he might be top 30 for me. I'd really have to flesh it out. Like, I'm not super high on Dirk. I like Dirk. He was one of my favorite players growing up, but as an adult mostly. But just to the point of is that I don't know if I would rate him that high. But do I think he would do well in today's era? Yes, I do. But let's get to the next guys. 1989, 1990, Magic Johnson. 2009, 2010, LeBron James. Do any of you, we'll start with Hoop God, do you think that Magic Johnson, if he had played during the 2010s, would have been able to take the MVP over LeBron James?
Absolutely. Magic Johnson leading the league in assists as many times he did. And you think about in the era where he had less possessions and he still accumulated the most assists per game in the regular season, the playoffs, the NBA finals. He set a record for most assists in a finals game with 14, I want to say, in 1985. I mean, just that aspect alone is moving me. Then, because I think a lot of people, none of you guys, I'm making a general statement. When I'm talking to people, they forget, Magic couldn't score. I'm like, okay, well, go ask Pat Riley why he asked him to take up more of a scoring load when Kareem was starting to decline. And I know you said the 2009, 2010 version, so I'm going to take the 1987 Magic Johnson when he was averaging 26 points per game on par with 13 assists, meaning he was not only getting his points, but was accounting for the other team's offensive production as well, based off his playmaking, his facilitating, and his incredible basketball IQ. So, yes, I do believe that version of Magic Johnson would have, without a doubt, took that MVP from LeBron. Now, to give LeBron a little credit, I think the Miami version of LeBron would have gave Magic a better challenge, but I know you said 09, 010, so I don't want to digress too far. But yeah, that version of Magic, I want him. I want him on my team every day.
What about the 89-90 Magic?
89-90, when he was starting to improve his three-point shot. As a matter of fact, yeah, because he won. See, the thing is, I think Magic had better numbers in 90-91 when he came in second to MJ, although he won in 89-90. I'll take that version of Magic because at this time, he doesn't have Kareem. So now you really see how Magic how he can facilitate and how he can lead, and he can also show that, hey, okay, the cap is gone, but I still can get this team to the NBA Finals. So yeah, I'll take that version of Magic as well, because by that time, if I'm not mistaken, he was shooting 90% from the free throw that year. It was either 88, 89 or 89, 90. So yeah, I'll take that version of Magic.
Rex, what's your take?
This is hard.
This one is hard. This actually is a lot harder than I thought.
This is probably the hardest one, in my opinion. The thing with Magic is what 89, 90, 91, that era right there for Magic, what it showed was exactly how much he was willing to play second fiddle to suit Kareem. As long as Kareem was there, even as Kareem got older, Magic was still, they were still working to get Kareem the ball. And when Kareem finally did leave, the team did not do as well because you lose an all-time great center. But Magic's game actually looked as though it became more all around because he wasn't saddled with the responsibility of getting the ball to the big guy. He became the main focus. And if he had only been able to play like that through his whole career, what would have Magic's stats have ended up being, right? But would he have had the rings? Who knows? But as of 2009, this is LeBron's last year in Cleveland, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Don't know a whole lot about it, but from what I understand, he at that point in his career, he was still mainly the drive and dish guy, right? He didn't settle for threes during that period of his career too much, did he? And he
shot.
was average from the free throw line.
Actually, he averaged 5 3-point attempts in
Yeah.
2009, 2010, which is his second, or well, I guess his later years in LA, he shot more. But at the time, that was a high for him for the next like
So
8 years.
so this is when he started shooting more outside then.
Yeah.
Because a couple years earlier, he really didn't, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not sure when it started going up, but I mean, I basically would just call it an even up break, just a wash, because I mean I don't know enough about LeBron to give a concise scouting report of it at that time of his career. I only watched LeBron early. And then Magic, I just think was absolutely phenomenal. So my heart would say, oh, Magic, obviously, Magic, no question. But in all honesty, I don't know that. So I just have to call it a push.
All right. Drew, are you going to go against the grain? Let's see.
Yeah, I actually, it's funny because I had the opposite experience of Rex. I didn't really know what Magic Johnson did like immediately following Kareem leaving. Like I was somewhat aware of it, but not as aware. Now, 09 2010 MVP. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I think this is one of the best MVPs won by a player, especially for LeBron's career. If you look at the guys he was playing with that year, he should not have won the MVP. They had the best record in the NBA that year, and now looking, the reason why I mentioned the Magic thing, they also had the best record in the league that year as well. So I have to give Magic his flowers. Kareem had just retired, and he still brought them to the best record in the NBA. He did. James Worthy did shoot more than him, so he wasn't the number one option. Although he did have more points overall than him. I know points are not everything, but he had guys around him. He had James Worthy. He had guys that were getting up there in age, but he had guys around him that could shoot. LeBron James had 37-year-old Shaquille O'Neal, who only played 53 games. He had Anton Jamison, who was 33 years old, who only played 25 games. And besides those two guys, it was Mo Williams and Anderson Varejao, who were great players. Well, not great players, but average players. So LeBron went off that year. He averaged almost 30 a game. He averaged almost 9 assists a game. Had over seven rebounds, looking at it here. He was a lockdown defensive player for them. They obviously that's not the year they got swept in the finals. That was a couple years before. They got beat by the Celtics, and it was after they already had put together their big three after he eliminated them before, or not them, but just Paul Pierce. So this is very close. This is the closest one that we've done so far. I am still going to have to say it was LeBron James, especially if we're going to talk about. We're still doing the whole like who would do better in current era, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm still going to have to go with LeBron James, not only because he's still playing, but just because this was prime LeBron. Like I know you could say that Miami Heat LeBron was more prime, but he took this team to 60 wins. So I don't think any other player, and I'll even throw Jordan in there. I'm sure you guys won't like to hear that. I think you could even throw Jordan on this team, and he would not have won 60 games because he wasn't winning 60 games before Pippen arrived. So this right here, to me, was a huge example of just how dominant LeBron was, but also eye-opening for him and why he needed to get the hell out of Cleveland because he was never going to win there. Because look at these players they put around him, and they were expecting him to win something with this. So I'm going to give it slight edge LeBron, but I'm looking at Magic's numbers that year, and he stepped up when Kareem left. He really, really stepped up. He was shooting over 38% from three. He was almost a 50-40-90 guy. Would we have expected that from Magic Johnson? He was almost 50-40-90 that year. But I'm still going to have to give it to LeBron just because of how insane that year was. And I remember that. The 09-2010 was when I was already a basketball fan, but I was going insane every night seeing LeBron just take over games against much better, on paper, much better teams. And, of course, the year didn't end the way you would expect an MVP, at least go to the finals. But, I mean, he's going against the damn big three Celtics, so what do you expect?
Maybe I should have moved Robin over a couple spaces. I see the steam coming out. What do you have to say about this, Robin?
My
Get
man
him,
did the
Rob.
typical LeBron James fan
Get
stuff,
him,
man.
Rob.
He
Get him,
immediately
Rob.
went to the teammates of LeBron James. He immediately went to LeBron James was carrying these guys. He immediately made it about nonsense that has nothing to do with LeBron James and the Magic Johnson MVP conversation that we're having here. But this is what these guys do. They must always have an excuse for LeBron James. He talked how great LeBron James was in that season. However, LeBron James couldn't even make it out of the second round that season, but he was having such a great season. Couldn't even make it out of the second round. And what's he going to say? Oh, LeBron James was playing with this guy. He was playing with that guy. Once again, not putting any responsibility on LeBron James and his lack of overall development in his game, which goes to why he wasn't able to get out of the second round, even though they won 60 games. So they won 60 games because of LeBron James, but when they get into the playoffs, they didn't win because of his
Magic didn't
teammates.
either.
That's the nonsense of these guys. But let's think about Magic Johnson and LeBron James here. One thing we can say for certain as it relates to this conversation here, we think about Magic Johnson in 1990. Magic Johnson can absolutely win an MVP in the 2010 NBA. We talk about LeBron James Eastern Conference. We think about the 60-plus wins they won that year, 61 wins, whatever it was. They won 66 the year before. He won back-to-back MVPs. The same thing as Magic Johnson, 89-90. But once again, what did he have to show for it? Nothing. The year before, he was bounced down in the Eastern Conference Finals when they were hyping him up to go against Kobe. Magic Johnson was in the NBA Finals. So we have to think about these things. And I don't think we can say that LeBron James is going to win an MVP in 1990 over prime Michael Jordan, prime Magic Johnson, over Hakeem Olajuwon, prime Charles Barkley, who a lot of people say should have won the MVP in 1990. So I don't believe that LeBron James is winning an MVP over any of those guys in the 1990 season when we think about his overall success or lack of overall success and his impact on the team, which has never really been there, which is why, like he said, the season didn't end up the way you would have hoped it would have been because LeBron James failed. Weren't they up against the Boston Celtics in that second round? I believe they were. But once again, it's always the teammates of LeBron James. There's no excuses for these guys. They're professionals. So I'm going with Magic Johnson because Magic Johnson has all the intangibles over LeBron James. All the grit, the heart, the leadership, galvanizing players, getting them and making them better. It's Magic Johnson, hands down.
So before you move on to the next guy, he mentioned that.
No, there's nothing to move on from. Go to the next guy, man.
Okay.
You said what you had to say. You're done.
All right. For me, I'm gonna have to say I believe that's everybody. I have to say that I would probably call it a push as well. I just think that LeBron has done well enough. He's won more MVPs in total. I'm just simplifying. But I get one thing that I do. Why I have Magic Johnson over Kareem is because of the things that Hoop God and others have mentioned about just his dominance when Kareem wasn't there. And I believe that, and it's not to say that Kareem wasn't a great player, but I think he was not in total as good as Magic Johnson. Because I don't know, I have to give it a push because I think that it could have gone either way. I could see Magic winning both. I could see LeBron winning both. If I had to give more of an edge to somebody, I would give it to Magic personally. But I'm not going to go over and say that it's one or the other because I really just don't know. But I think they both would have a chance in today's league, given those time periods of their playing days. Let's get into the next guys.
Wait, let me go real quick. I didn't go.
Oh, you didn't go? Oh, I'm sorry. My bad.
I'm gonna ruffle some feathers. So
okay,
I have to push back a little bit on what Drew said that Michael wouldn't win 60 games because the flip side is that I don't think LeBron would do any better in Michael's situation before he got Pippen either. Right, just the landscape of the league. I definitely think Michael could have done the same, and I think LeBron would have done as worse as Jordan. That being said, I am actually going to take LeBron on this one. I'm going to take the proven commodity 2009-2010 who got 30 points, 9 assists, 7 rebounds, right? His efficiency's through the roof. He had an amazing year, and this is essentially, in my opinion, right, this is what he would play like in today's league, right? You would be getting 37 and 9 from him on pretty incredible efficiency. and Rex kind of said it. If I can get LeBron James going to the hole, aggressive, 48 minutes, then I will take that LeBron, the proven commodity in the more modern time, then maybe Magic translates to today. Maybe he doesn't do as good as we hope. And so I'm kind of going with the higher floor as compared to Magic probably has the highest ceiling, right? If he gets out there and he's dropping 15 assists, scoring 20, 25 points, right? That's a different ball game, but I'm hoping he does that, right? So just from a sort of strategy standpoint, I'll take the higher floor of what I know I'm going to get from LeBron more than likely than Magic. Again, it's very close, right? But I probably would give a slight edge to the known commodity of knowing what LeBron would do in today's league over hoping Magic adapts or changes his game and does better than 37 and 9. I mean, those are pretty insane numbers no matter how you try and chop it up. So I'm going to go a little counter current here, and I'm going to actually give a very slight edge to LeBron over Magic.
All right, let's get into the next group of people. So 91 to 93 versus 11 to 3. So Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley, Derrick Rose, and LeBron James. And I believe it's Rex's turn to start.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's four quite different, quite different players there. Well,
Hoop God, silence your mic.
In the background.
Well, I thought he was playing LeBron highlights.
Yo, that's a bar, Rex.
Well, the thing with D Rose is, I mean, we really, he's one of the biggest what ifs, right? I mean, what was that MVP year a fluke, or was that what we would have had for a decade, right? So to weigh it against the others is awful hard to do. He's the smallest guy. In today's game, obviously, that version of D Rose would just be phenomenal, right? I mean, he would be at the top. That is what is, his game. I think they put too much on threes when we're having this conversation about this new era, this era being so three ball dominant. None of the guys that have won, we're talking about MVPs here, none of the guys that have won MVP lately, aside from Steph, the greatest to do it, is a three-point shooter. It's really a lot less relevant than the media makes it out to be. The big thing with Magic, with Michael and Barkley was they would take on the responsibility. They always did, right? They always took it on their shoulders. So that guy's always going to get more respect. So when it comes to MVP voting in close races, those types of guys are going to win out. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But LeBron, like I said, I didn't watch this version of LeBron, so I can't speak intelligently to it. But I trust what Nick says. And Nick said that this was really the prime LeBron. This was prime LeBron, the best he ever was, right? Basically, this era, these couple
most
years.
People would say, yeah, most people
Drew
would say
kind of
that.
said that,
Okay.
but yeah.
Okay.
Which I largely agree, probably.
I would have to go with LeBron up there. Now, when we're talking, what year are we talking for Jordan? Is this 92?
He won in 91 and 92.
So we're talking the 91, 92, not the later Jordan in the second three-peat.
Correct.
Wow, I don't know. like I said, I mean, Jordan was the beauty queen. I mean, literally, if practically any basketball player, fan, whatever, were to close your eyes and just describe your MVP and how they played, it would be Jordan. He fit that mold. That was why he was so, for lack of a better term, photogenic. You know, he had the whole bit. His game was the type of game that catches the interest to be MVP. So I'd have to put him up there with LeBron, right behind Barkley in third. Just because he could be erratic. So he was always in the MVP conversation, but only I think 2 years was he actually in a position to win it, and he won it one of those, I believe. Or did he win it two? No, he only won one, right? And then I'd put D Rose last of the four, just because you're not really, that 1 year, right? He had that 1 year, and then the injuries came. So, like I said, now that we're getting more to the more recent, I really can't compare because I don't watch these guys. So I have to go off what you guys tell me. But I would go Michael and LeBron up there, then down to Barkley, and then to the little guy, D Rose, as the fourth among that group. And like I said, only because the D Rose, we don't know. It's one of the biggest could have beens in NBA history, right? So.
All right, Drew, this is the first time Michael and LeBron have been directly compared. I want to know what you have to say about this being a LeBron as the GOAT guy.
Well, I might disappoint you a little bit because you said this is 91, 92, Jordan?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Versus prime LeBron.
I get
unless
that.
you think different, yeah.
I think this is Jordan. To me personally, I think this is Jordan's best years ever. He was completely nuclear in the playoffs. He stepped up his numbers in almost every regard when it came to the playoffs in these years. So as much as I love LeBron, I like LeBron's totality. When it came to the prime, Jordan's prime was above all. This was what his best era to me. So not even close. I'm going to put Jordan number one, and the other guys are quite some distance behind him. So then it comes down to LeBron, Charles Barkley, and D Rose. Another thing that I could see ruffling some feathers, I don't think Derrick Rose should have won MVP that year. He was one of the best players in the league that year, but I don't think he should have won MVP.
Well, I didn't want to go that far out on a limb, but I was thinking that.
I didn't think he should have won it, but I think there was some fatigue. There was definitely some people pissed that a certain player went down to South Beach. So I think it should have. LeBron number two. Barkley, though, I know before we got on the air, I mentioned that there's some guys from the old era that I don't know if they could have made it in this era in terms of being MVP type players. I don't think that applies to Charles Barkley that year, though. He was one of the guys I was thinking, would Charles Barkley translate well to this era? But I think he absolutely would have. His efficiency numbers are off the chain. Rebounders in any year, a good rebounder is gonna pay himself. He's gonna be worth his weight in gold. So I think in this era, at this version of Charles Barkley, I think he would be above Derrick Rose. I think he would. Who would stop him? I don't see anybody in today's NBA that could stop Barkley on the boards, getting his points, getting his teammates involved, and the underrated defensive presence that I think he brings. I mean, there's people that know he's a good defender, but just how good he was, I think I'd put him above Derrick Rose. I honestly might put him right behind LeBron. Even though LeBron was at his prime during this time, I don't think winning MVPs was really on his mind. So there was other years that I think LeBron won MVPs might have been a little bit better than that year.
All right. What do you got to say, Robin?
Oh, man, listen. Once again, what do I always say? Or what have I been saying? We have someone like a Derrick Rose in a conversation, and we're talking about MVPs, and we're talking about past eras. Once again, we don't know about Derrick Rose. He's a big what if, man. Okay. But let's be real here. His ceiling was that MVP award. He wasn't going any higher than that. For him to win another MVP, yeah, maybe. I doubt it. When you have guys like Kevin Durant coming up and LeBron James and some of these other guys still coming up that were going to probably be better and greater than Derrick Rose. So I think that was really his peak. Yes, he would have had a much greater overall totality career-wise, but I don't think he's seen anything higher than an MVP or another one in his career. So for me, Derrick Rose, he doesn't belong in the conversation with these guys, a Charles Barkley, a LeBron James, and a Michael Jordan. So what does this do? Once again, it adds to what I've been saying this entire time. It shows that a lot of these MVPs from a lot of these current eras, they couldn't sniff the MVPs in some of these past eras. Derrick Rose is not sniffing an MVP in the 90s. He's not. He's not sniffing an MVP over Michael Jordan or Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, David Robinson, Hakeem Olajuwon, Shaquille O'Neal. He's not sniffing an MVP in that era, man. And I'm not trying to sound crazy, man, but this is the facts here, man. He's not that ilk. You said, my man just said he shouldn't have even won that MVP. We can say that for a lot of guys, and we can say that some guys didn't deserve it or someone deserved it more. We can have those conversations, but Derrick Rose is not in this conversation. Now, when we think about LeBron James and Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley, these guys, to me, we talk about peaks and we're talking about guys in their primes. For me, Michael Jordan, the difference between him and everybody else in NBA's history is that there was never a decline in his game. His game evolved. When people talk about Michael Jordan, they mention his ability to change his game to become more of a jump shooter. That's not a negative on Michael Jordan. His game evolved because as his athleticism started to go, he was able to use the other skills in his repertoire to maintain that level. Where's the evidence of this? He led the league in scoring every year he was in the NBA, essentially. So that shows that there was no decline in his overall game. He was still able to score effectively at a high level. His defensive impact was still there all these years later. So that shows his game not declining, right? We think about someone like LeBron James. He hasn't won an MVP since he was 28 years old. He's about to be 40 next season. Hasn't won an MVP in a long time now, man. Hasn't been a defensive team since he was, 28, 29 years old, never in his 30s. So when we talk about guys being consistent and guys falling off and things of that nature, that's where you see the decline in these guys, all right? And Michael Jordan never had that decline. So for me, he's clearing shows above LeBron James for any of these conversations. And then we think about LeBron James versus Charles Barkley. To me, when we talk about, once again, the peaks of players, to me, this was the last year of Charles Barkley's full potential and his all-out peak. From about 1987 to about 93, 94. That was Charles Barkley, man. Especially those first 3-4 years when he was on the Philadelphia 76ers, Charles Barkley at his absolute physical peak was something sensational, man. Still to this day, I've never seen someone that size do the things that he was able to do, the rebounding, dribbling and igniting the fast break, catching alley-oops, catching back dunks off the rebounds and things of this nature at 6'5". I mean, it was crazy what he was doing. But I don't know if I would put him above a LeBron James for an MVP in the 90s. LeBron James would be in the conversation for an MVP in the 90s, along with the Charles Barkley, who happened to win one during that time. But I don't believe LeBron James would ever win multiple MVPs in the 90s going against that stiff kind of competition. So I'm going to go Michael Jordan, LeBron, Charles Barkley, and Derrick Rose in a distant fourth.
All right. Nick, what do you got to say?
Just quick, if Derrick Rose wouldn't have won it, are we all saying LeBron should have won it or would have been second behind him?
LeBron or Durant?
Yeah, okay, I think LeBron probably should have won that one.
LeBron would have won 5 MVPs in a row. That would have been pretty crazy. That's a pretty nice feather in your cap. But I kind of agree with Robin. I think Rose is a distant fourth here. Even his numbers weren't necessarily off the charts crazy, like 25, 8 assists, 4 rebounds. That's nice, but that's not elite in terms of what we're talking about here. Although, being 22 and winning an MVP is pretty impressive. I think Wes Unseld's the only other guy to win it at that young of age. But yeah, I got Rose in fourth. Obviously, I got Jordan 1.
Well,
If I am getting Charles Barkley at 25 points, 12 rebounds, and 5-6 assists, I think that gives him a slight edge, the interior presence over LeBron. Again, between LeBron and Barkley, I want the guy who's going to the hole aggressively. I think for both of them, that's where they're their strongest. And I just have a little bit more, I feel a lot safer with Barkley in that aspect over LeBron. In terms of, this year we're talking about, I mean, he had 5 assists a game for Barkley. I mean, that's not too shabby for someone who played the way that he did with the 12 rebounds. I'd probably give a slight edge to Barkley. Although him and LeBron, they're right there. You could swap them out second and third, however you want. But I got Jordan and Rose on the bookends, and then LeBron and Barkley are really close. I think I like Barkley's aggressiveness, attacking the hole, staying at what he's good at, in the interior play. I think I like that a little more than LeBron, but I wouldn't be mad if you put LeBron second and Barkley third.
All right, Hoop God, what do you got to say?
Yeah, I'm gonna be brief because you guys pretty much covered everything I was gonna bring to the table. But I would say we're putting LeBron in this modern day era up against Barkley, Jordan, and D Rose with the shooting. So I would always say this: is LeBron going to improve on his jump shot? Because we know he can drive in, which is great. I mean, that's awesome. But if that's the only thing you can do, then I feel like that's going to be an easier defense to scheme around versus Michael Jordan. You don't know where to attack him because he can attack you in a multitude of ways. Charles Barkley, I mean, for his size and his stature, he still had a respectable jump shot that you had to honor it because he could kill you out there. And then Derrick Rose with his explosiveness, I believe that's the biggest knock on his career is just he wasn't durable. And I mean, he took like a lot of unnecessary falls. And I know this may sound kind of crazy, but like there's an art to falling, and that's something Derrick Rose.
There is absolutely.
He failed to exceed in the art of falling, and unfortunately, that was the demise of his career. So I'm gonna say him. Yeah, I'm gonna go Michael Jordan. LeBron slightly over Barkley if he can improve his jump shot. That's the only caveat I'm gonna give him. And Barkley and then Derrick Rose. That would be my order.
All right, for me, it's similar ilk for I think it was everybody. If not, I have Michael, LeBron, Charles, and then Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose, I agree, not close to these guys. I got Michael again because of just how dominant he was during that time. It's harder for me with Charles and LeBron. I would just give the edge to LeBron at face value, though. I'd have to really analyze those two seasons. I mean, Barkley was still a monster either way, but I think I'd have to give it to LeBron for what you guys had mentioned as well to keep it brief.
Do y'all agree that Rose was the most explosive point guard we've ever seen?
I like John Morant for explosive, but he was definitely way up there.
You got Russell Westbrook up there too.
I mean, Westbrook for sure.
Maybe springy, although John Morant's really springy.
Yeah, John Morant, man. He's speaking of the art of falling. He needs to learn the art of falling.
Yeah. I was going to say, take it from an uncoordinated, unathletic guy. There's an art to falling for sure.
Yeah,
100%.
His ups, man, his explosion. But I'm worried about him because I love John Morant. He's one of my more exciting players I like to watch. But
oh yeah, he's exciting for sure. Okay, sorry to get on a tangent.
All right, so we're gonna do from 14 to 16. So it's 5 now. I'm just trying to speed it up a little bit. Steph Curry, KD, Hakeem Olajuwon, David Robinson, and Michael Jordan. And we'll start with Drew.
Wow. So let's go. You said Durant, Curry, Hakeem, Jordan, and who was the other one?
Robinson.
Robinson. Okay. Wow. Those are who's who right there.
Yeah, no joke.
That is incredibly hard. He started with me. Let's see. Well, Jordan. All right. Let's get that out of the way. Let's just put him off to the side here.
96 Jordan.
90. It doesn't even really matter, honestly. 96 Jordan may not have had the sheer explosiveness that he had, but he had the experience. He had the wiliness. He had the crazy like a fox. So I'm still putting him number 1. Hakeem, David Robinson. And you said Durant and Curry. Okay, well, Curry, number 2. I think you're talking about today's era. I mean, there's not a more today's era type player than Curry. I might even put Durant right behind him too, because we're talking about today's era. These guys there's not more today's era than those two guys.
Yeah.
Then it becomes Hakeem and David, which feels sacrilegious to put them at the very end of this conversation. But I would have to go with Hakeem. The finesse, the power, the ability to adapt his game, to bring his game to another level when the lights are on. It really doesn't feel right to put David Robinson 5th there. but I don't think Hakeem would have any issues adjusting his game. He proved that in his career that he could do that. So I'm going to put Hakeem fourth, David fifth. Although, like again, it does not feel right putting these guys that far back. But basing on today's era, that's how it'd be: Jordan, Curry, Durant, Hakeem, David Robinson.
All right, Robin, what do you got to say?
Yeah, man. So once again, man, you know, it continues. We talk about guys from these eras and winning these MVPs, man. And look at the names you just mentioned. You mentioned Michael Jordan once again. You mentioned Hakeem Olajuwon, and you mentioned David Robinson, and you mentioned Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, and LeBron James. You mentioned, right? Those are the guys you mentioned.
So Robinson, Hakeem, Steph Curry, Durant, and Jordan.
Oh, okay. Right. See, so for me, when we talk about, you know, Steph Curry and we talk about what he, you know, what would he look like in this era, we can see what Steph Curry looks like in this era. He's sensational in this era. But for me, the conversation when we talk about him possibly winning MVP in the 90s is where things get interesting. Because for me, this is where someone like a Steph Curry gets exposed. In my opinion, he's not winning an MVP in the 90s. This is, in my opinion, he's not winning an MVP in the 90s. We talk about Kevin Durant. Once again, I do not believe Kevin Durant is winning an MVP in the 90s. However, these players in this generation, this era, absolutely. Kevin Durant with the smooth jump shot, Steph Curry, his ability to handle the basketball, things of this nature. So I think, yes, when we talk about Hakeem Olajuwon, the one thing for me, when we talk about David Robinson, this is the thing about David Robinson that I've always told people. When we talk about the greatest centers and people mention David Robinson, these are usually the conversation that he's brought up in. But when we talk about him being successful in this kind of era, David Robinson to me is one of the greatest athletic centers in the history of the NBA. I believe he's more athletic than a Hakeem Olajuwon. So if we put him in this era, David Robinson running up and down the court in this era, he would be sensational right now. David Robinson catching alley-oops on the fast break. David Robinson cleaning up the rebounds. David Robinson, like you guys were mentioning earlier, the post game is starting to come back into the NBA. When we talk about guys in the high post, we talk about a guy like a Jokic or someone even like an Embiid who's in the low post who can work. Someone like a David Robinson would be fantastic in this open game with the running and the spacing. And like I said, his athleticism. So I think he would be great. So I'm going to put him above Hakeem Olajuwon. As far as Hakeem Olajuwon's maybe his overall footwork, his skills, his overall game. But to me, David Robinson was a superior athlete. But when we talk about some of these guys, once again, see what we're saying is like these guys are going to be great. They're going to be great in any era. However, are they going to be the MVP caliber greatness in these eras? You could be a great NBA player. You could be a Hall of Famer and never sniff an MVP in your career. So we must think about these things. No one's going to say that Kevin Durant's not going to be a 10-time All-Star in the 90s. No one's saying that LeBron James won't be a 10-time, 12-time All-Star. You know what I'm saying? Playing in these eras. What we're saying is you're not going to win an MVP or multiple MVPs playing in some of these other eras because of the caliber of players. And it keeps getting exposed every time we mention a current player that's won an MVP more recently. Steph Curry and Kevin Durant, like I said, as great as they are, to me, they're nowhere near top 10 players in NBA's history. And for someone like a Michael Jordan, a Hakeem Olajuwon, even a David Robinson, when you're talking about these are the guys you're going against in the 90s for an MVP, a Charles Barkley, a Karl Malone, a Shaquille O'Neal, I don't see them winning an MVP in the 90s. I just don't see it.
Nick, what do you got to say?
Yeah, I like Robin's take on Robinson and Hakeem because I got Hakeem above Robinson. But if I put him in today's league, I think Robinson's brutality gives him a slight edge over Hakeem if we put him in today's league. I like that point. I agree with that one. Even though I have Hakeem over Robinson all time, I think Robinson might actually thrive a little more than Hakeem in today's league. Again, Curry is the quintessential modern day player. Obviously, I got MJ first. I might have to go Curry second just because we know what he is today, right? I mean, we're talking about today's league, right? So it's kind of, for me, it's a known commodity. I know what I'm getting out of Curry versus hoping these other guys can translate. We're talking about today's game, right? So I probably would go MJ. I probably would go Curry next. Again, he's the quintessential player of today and what we're talking about. I probably then go Robinson, Hakeem, Durant.
All right. Hoop God, what's your take?
So I actually like this one. Of course I'm gonna go with Michael Jordan first and foremost. Just with he has literally out of all of them, he has no weaknesses on either ends of the floor. And then in an era where you can't touch him, more spacing. Now I will say this to Michael's credit, he's on record as saying he really doesn't like the three ball that much because it takes away from his aggression. After he lit up Clyde Drexler in that '92 series, they were asking him about it. He was like, "Well, see, when you hit 1 3, guess what? You want to hit another one, and you want to hit another one." He said, "When you start doing that, you stop driving. You don't start driving as much." And he was like, "said I don't really just like want to value the three ball because it takes away from my aggression. Which what's the old saying? If it ain't broke, don't fix it." So Michael Jordan, clear cut number one. I'm gonna echo what Nick said, and I'm going to take Wardell, Stephen Curry at number 2, because we do know what we saw. We literally seen it with our own 2 eyes. But this is something else that I don't know if you guys were aware of. But when you go look at the greatest player efficiency rating seasons, like individual seasons, Michael Jordan and Steph Curry are the only guys in the top 15, and Curry's 12, and I think Jordan is like 5th or 7th. Don't quote me on that because I hadn't looked at it in a while. But for those two to be the only guards amongst big men, that's moving me. And then you factor in Steph Curry with his off-ball ability. He can create shots for his teammates based off the gravity that he can attract, much like Michael Jordan as well. In this era, again, with all the spacing. So I'm gonna take MJ. I'm gonna take Curry. Now, number 3, I got to go with Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon. Reason being, he's the most skilled center of all, offensively, defensively, the most complete center of all. It's not a knock to D-Rob or any of the other guys, but I'm sorry. I seen what that man did to David Robinson in the Western Conference Finals, and he demoralized that man. So I don't see Giannis putting up a fight against him. Jokic, that would be, I would pay money to watch that one because they're highly skilled. Joel Embiid, I'm sorry, he's too much of a wine, give me an MVP. Like, nah, I ain't, you're not ready for Dream. And then we got to factor this into the equation. Hakeem played volleyball, played handball, played soccer. So that is also giving him an advantage with his footwork and his skill set. Now he's getting to practice the 3 ball. I'm going to go on record saying he's going to be a better 3-point shooter than Joel Embiid. And I'm going to say him and Jokic are going to be like tit for tat because I don't really think Hakeem would like take a high volume, but granted, he would have it in his bag, seeing that is the era that we're playing in. 4th, I'm gonna go D-Rob, and the reason being is he won a scoring title, won MVP, made it to the Western Conference Finals ultimately, but didn't get to the finals due to Hakeem being in his way over Kevin Durant because I value the guy who can stick it out with one team. Now, granted, Kevin Durant, he had to take his path and to be successful to what he did. That's his business, and I got to give him all the due credit for his efficiency. But he's not bringing on the defensive side with David Robinson and with Hakeem, with Michael Jordan. And I know Steph Curry is not known as being a defender, but this is why I say Steph Curry's offense to me is his defense. Who are you going to put on Steph Curry? First, second, third quarter, and he's running you through all those screens. Your legs are going to be gone by the 4th quarter. I feel comfortable saying nobody's going to be as physically fit as Steph Curry when it comes to cardio and conditioning. So I'm going to give him that edge over Durant simply because he's going to wear all of your opponents down where they're going to be gasping for breath. And what the great Vince Lombardi said, fatigue makes cowards of us all. So now you're trying to run under the screen and Steph Curry lighten you up. If you go over the screen, he's just going to go to the goal and either throw an alley-oop lob to Draymond or kick out to Clay. So that would be my order. It would be MJ, Curry, the Dream, D-Rob, Kevin Durant.
All right. Rex, and then I'll go, and then well, actually, Drew, you gotta go right now. You can say your buys if you want.
Yes, yeah, I do. Unfortunately, I do appreciate you gentlemen and being able to talk to you all. It was nice meeting the guys I haven't met. Rex, I hope you feel better, and I really appreciate you, Dart, bringing me on today. And I look forward to getting on and talking to you gentlemen next time.
Nice to meet you, man.
Yeah, it was nice meeting you guys.
Take it easy.
Take it easy. Be safe.
Drew, have a good day. Yep. Check him out at Superb Sports Media.
Yes. Check us out. Thank you.
Yep.
I'll check him out.
Oh yeah, he's got a lot of great stuff for people that don't know him. Rex, what do you have to say about this?
So we're talking about all 5. Wow. Well, like we've already. I'm not just going to say the same thing about Jordan over and over and over. So let's just go ahead and put that out to Jordan. When it comes, I think Hakeem, if he played today, basically he would just play exactly the same because he was just madly efficient, and he controlled a certain portion of the court. And to take him out of that portion of the court for any reason lessens your effectiveness. It's like I told you with Wemby this year that, remember I told you before they moved him to center that they would start winning when they moved him to center.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. David, all right, that's my biased one, okay? He's the one guy I am biased to. But David would be even better today. Yes, he was amazing athlete. He could actually shoot better than y'all think. He could shoot from 3-point range. He actually enjoyed playing the mid post more than the low post. So this era would really suit him because the mid post up is something you see a lot more these days. Now, for me, Durant, I guess I'm not as high on Durant as a lot of other people are. To me, if Kevin Durant lived in the 1970s, his name would be Bob McAdoo. If he lived in the 1980s, his name would be Alex English. Tremendously skilled offensive player, but doesn't have the kind of game that pulls a team along on his back. If you know what I mean. Steph is Steph. Like I said, if you look at the MVPs through this era, they're all big guys, except for Steph. So Steph's the outlier. So I guess I'd go Jordan and Steph above. I would actually, David and Hakeem, I think I would put pretty much as a tie. I remember Huga was mentioning what Hakeem did against David, but when you're voting for an MVP, that really has nothing to do with it. It's about what you do against the entire league for the entire regular season. And then I'd have Durant last purely because I see Durant essentially just like Steph. He's a one-trick pony, and if he's on, he's super on. If he's not, you're not winning.
Yeah. All right, for me, I would do it like this. I'd have Jordan number 1. I would have Hakeem number 2, just because of what all of you said. He was also dominant on both sides of the court, exceptionally, I believe, over everybody else that's on this list. Number 3, it's close for me with Steph and David Robinson. I would probably have Steph up there just because he's done it. And David Robinson, although he had gone to the Western Conference Finals before Tim Duncan joined him, that's really the reason why I'm putting him under Steph. But I also believe that he would have been absolutely successful during this time as well. And I'd put Durant last. I just think that Durant, he's also an all-time great. I'm not saying he's not. I just think that what he's done, he's only won with that loaded Warriors team. Now, he was MVP. I think he was the best player on those teams for Finals MVP, but I just can't put him ahead of these other guys in regards to winning league MVP. I just don't think it would work that way. This will be the last one before we open the lines for calls. So this is the list of players: Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and then Karl Malone and Michael Jordan. I forget who started last time.
I think it's me now.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so for me, once again, the theme continues. We have guys like James Harden, guys like Russell Westbrook, and this is what we're talking about. To me, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, these are all-time great players, no doubt about it. They're Hall of Fame caliber players. But at the same time, for me, in the 90s, I don't believe that either one of these players are winning an MVP in that era over the players that we've been mentioning that have won the MVPs in the 90s. But when we're talking about players playing in this type of environment, to me, yet and still, someone like a Russell Westbrook is struggling in this type of era of NBA. Russell Westbrook's best years were about 10 years ago, when the NBA started to make that transition, the 2012, the 2013, the 2014 seasons. These are Russell Westbrook's best years, his most successful years, even though he won an MVP during the 2017 NBA season. To me, that wasn't necessarily Russell Westbrook at his quote unquote best. And with the change of the type of game that's been going on, Russell Westbrook has never really developed an overall jump shot. His overall jump shot, if you remember, has actually gotten worse throughout his career. If you look at him early on in his career, the free throw percentage, the shooting overall, I believe goes to his lack of confidence with his overall jump shot, and all the things that he went through with Kevin Durant and Kevin Durant leaving him. And that hurt a lot of Westbrook's confidence, man. You can tell that really impacted him overall. So for me, I believe Russell Westbrook has struggled. And then we think about James Harden. The success that he's had in this era or this style of NBA was really, kind of smoke screens, in my opinion, when we think about the things he was getting away with for those couple of seasons there in Houston, where he was essentially carrying the ball every single play. He was taking 2-3 steps backwards to take a three-point shot. I mean, we all saw what was going on. It was a complete embarrassment of the NBA, and it was a complete abuse of the quote-unquote rules that the NBA refuses to enforce. And then they had to start making adjustments for James Harden hooking guys' arms and flopping and taking a gazillion free throws a game. So for me, once again, James Harden's his MVP is hollow to me. He won it off of numbers that were fabricated off of the style that he was able to get away with during that season. So for me, once again, I do not believe James Harden sniffing an MVP in the 90s and him being successful in this era of NBA. I don't really believe that we can say he's been successful because he hasn't been successful. In the postseason, all those gimmicks that he does do not work because he gets exposed for his play being a gimmick. Someone like a Steph Curry, he has been successful in the postseason because his game and overall skills are not a gimmick. He gives you, and what you get from Steph Curry is real. It's tangible. James Harden is not. So for me, I don't believe I'm not ranking him high. Russell Westbrook, I'm not ranking him high. I'm going to put Michael Jordan. Karl Malone, to me, once again, Karl Malone has the sweet jump shot. Is he going to shoot three-pointers? No, I don't see Karl Malone adjusting and becoming a three-point shooter. However, Karl Malone's durability, his athleticism, his toughness, his grit, his heart, his effort, and like I said, his mid-range jump shot, his ability to score, he'll be successful in this era. I'll take Karl Malone, Michael Jordan over Russell Westbrook and over James Harden.
We're innovating.
All right, real fast, I want to go and I want to shout out Pierre Lynch. Thank you for the super chat. I put the question in there, but just to reiterate for people that have just came in, who would win the MVP out of these guys in today's NBA, which is Giannis Antetokounmpo, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Michael Jordan, or Karl Malone, and we are ranking them in order. But thank you again, Pierre, for the super chat. I appreciate it. And yeah,
I'll put Giannis above Karl Malone. I forgot to mention Giannis, man. My fault, guys.
So what's your list again?
So I'll go with obviously with Michael Jordan. Then I'll go with Giannis. Then I'll go with Karl Malone. Then I'll go with Russell Westbrook, and then I'll go with James Harden.
All right, Nick, what's your take?
Yeah, I got Westbrook 5th. I got Harden 4th. I think those are the two easy ones to place. You can switch them out 4 and 5 if you wanted. I got MJ 1, obviously, and one I'm struggling with is Giannis and Malone. I feel like Giannis is a little more fluid and agile. Malone's a little bit more muscle. This one's hard, to be honest with you, because Giannis, of all the guys I think of today, right, I think a lot of people notice that he has the mentality of the older eras, that he doesn't really want to be friends with people. He just wants to win. Which rubs some people these days the wrong way. I personally like it. So, I mean, in terms of like the mentality and things like that, I think he translates well to Malone. You could easily compare them with the mindset. I think he has the same sort of edge to him. Man, I don't know. This one's really hard. I want to say because of Giannis's defensive prowess over maybe a slight edge there over Malone, and being maybe a little bit more agile up and down the court. My gut tells me to give Giannis a slight edge over Malone for what he can do. 94 feet in both ends. Again, I like Malone's offensive game a little more. It's a little more polished. And I say the same for Giannis. I think he does a little bit more on the defensive end. Can probably guard more positions a little better than Malone. I probably got to go Giannis slightly over Malone, just in this snapshot, right? Not for a career, but in this snapshot, I'm going to give Giannis a very slight edge over Malone. So I got MJ, Giannis, Malone, Harden, and Westbrook in that order.
All right, Rex, what's your take?
See, the thing that I keep trying to remind myself is we're talking about for the MVP vote only, not which one we would pick if we were trying to win a championship or who beat who head to head or any of that. It's purely those seasons played today, who would get the MVP vote.
Yeah, that version of that player, yeah.
Yeah, the triple-double Westbrook would get a whole lot of fanfare. It didn't end up meaning anything to his team's success, really. Harden's isolation play gives you all kinds of highlights, but doesn't give you substance in the playoffs. But we're not talking about the playoffs. I guess really the same as the other guys. Jordan, I think Giannis and Malone would be a lot closer because their numbers, I believe, were very similar. Yes, they achieved them in a different manner as far as their individual, their skill set, but they basically got the same points from the same areas on the floor, got the same rebounds, I believe. The defensive presence is different in that Giannis is a shot blocker and Malone had very quick hands and got lots of steals for a big guy. So he did his damage with his feet on the floor, not in the air. I'd have to go with Giannis, I guess, at number 2 over Malone. The one thing, talking about Malone, if he would stretch out to shooting threes this era, it's really the same as with Hakeem. If you really pay attention to their shooting forms, Hakeem Olajuwon and Malone, they really fundamentally have bad shooting forms in that they shoot with their elbow out and they shoot with all forearm and all wrist. That's not conducive to becoming a consistent three-point shooter. There are no consistent three-point shooters that shoot with their form. So I would put that they would not put those into their repertoire. But they also didn't need to. Like I said, I think the whole everyone having to be able to shoot 3-pointers is a really overblown image of today that actually doesn't exist. In this 3-point era, the only team that has actually won shooting 3-pointers is the team that has the greatest 3-point shooter. So it's really a negligible difference in reality. So I guess Jordan, Giannis, Malone, and I think personally I'd have to put Westbrook over Harden, but probably not by much.
For me, I got Jordan, I've got Giannis, I've got Malone, and then I've got Harden, and then I've got Westbrook. For me, okay. I think that Westbrook MVP It was I believe they only gave it to him just because it hadn't been done since Oscar Robertson. I think it was really just to sell individual statistics. I don't think that he should have won it otherwise, other than he had done something that hadn't been done for 40 plus years. Outside of that, I don't think he should have won MVP at all. And I think that's the only reason they gave it to him. Harden, again, really kind of to your guys' sentiment, especially with Rex, is just highlights and just with that step back jumper, 3-point style that he had. And then during that time, he was more aggressive in general going to the rim. The reason why I put Giannis over Malone is I believe, not that Malone is bad or anything. I do believe that Giannis, if I had to match them up against each other, I would pick Giannis over Malone, skill set wise. But Malone, I do think could hang in today's, and I think it's close for me. It's the other two are way down there, but Malone and Giannis are close to me. I would give the edge to Giannis though. But yeah. I guess real fast, I don't know if any of you have to go. We're going to open up the line for callers. You got to go, Robin?
Yeah, I gotta get out of here, guys.
You have any last words before we open the lines?
No, man. Yo, it was a great show, man. This is a really cool topic, talking about different players and having this conversation. I thought this was really good, man. So once again, it was great to hear, my man Rex, Nick, the other guy, his Drew, you said his name was?
Hook shot, Drew. Yep.
My man, Hoop God. Shout out to all those guys. Everybody in the comment section, man. Once again, Dart, thank you, man, for having me on again, man. And I hope that guy, I didn't get too crazy on him, right? I kept it cool, right? So hopefully he'll come back, man. No hard feelings, man.
It definitely wasn't as bad as the GJK cats. That you cooked them. They for some reason think they won every debate with us on a sidebar. I don't think they won any debate with us, but I mean,
yeah,
whatever.
like most of LeBron James fans say that LeBron James won every single NBA Finals. He never lost, right? They never take the losses like men.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you for coming, Robin. For everyone who hasn't seen Robin before, check him out at Sports and Fitness Rants. He's got a lot of great content on there. Thank you again for coming, and I will see you on the flip side, sir.
All right, guys. You guys be good, man.
Later, man.
All right, you too.
Yeah.
So I've dropped the link in the chat if anybody would like to call in and discuss this or have a question about this. Otherwise, I guess we could keep the lines open and just talk for a little bit more. I like the concept, and I kind of did this as well, just for people to compare how good these individual players were from the 80s and 90s that get disrespected nowadays. I thought it was an easy list just to use the MVPs in comparison because those, some people like to split hairs with superstars and stars. So I guess let's open it for an open discussion. Is there somebody else from the 80s or 90s that I didn't list? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot that you think would compete very well that was a star or superstar in the 80s and 90s. Either one of you can go that would compete in today's NBA.
Alex English.
Why do you say that?
He was KD. He's the all-time leading scorer not all-time, but he's the leading scorer in the 1980s.
Yeah.
He outscored every other player in the 80s. He could fill it up. And that's today's game. He was 6'8", thin, could run all day, could rebound for being a slight guy.
Yeah.
I think Dominique would be really interesting to see in today's NBA. MVP level, you could argue, but I think an open floor. I mean, he's 4 or 5 inches taller than Ja Morant with just as much spring. I mean, I think he'd be really. I mean, he was fun to watch. Period. Right, but I think in today's league, he could easily average 30 a game, depending on the system he's in and how it unfolds. But I think he'd be really fun to watch in today's game.
One guy I think who often gets disrespected nowadays, who is the partner of Karl Malone, John Stockton. People like to say that he was just slow athletic and just throw in his complexion as well, that he was white, he couldn't compete. although he was going up against some of the greatest point guards of the time, and as the kids say, cooking them. As one of the, I'm sure a lot of people have seen the Gary Payton interview where he goes and he says John Stockton was the hardest guy that he ever guarded. He was crafty. He can pass just on paper without even watching it. Granted, he had Karl Malone, but at the same time, he could shoot 3-pointers just looking on paper. But he just took his shots. He was super efficient. He was crafty. And I think that he would absolutely be able to compete in today's league, and probably be showcased even a lot more than he was back then, just for some of the things that he was able to do on people. I wouldn't say he was super sexy with the passing, but he did have some great passes. I wouldn't quite say he was on the level of Magic Johnson or somebody like that, but I definitely think he would have competed. But to what you guys, what's that?
I would say Mark Aguirre is another guy that gets lost a lot in the shuffle of the 80s. Remember, he was one of the original 3 guys who did the Converse with Bird and Magic there for a little bit. Obviously, being a Mav, I know of him a little more than maybe others or think about him more, but he was another good guy. I think doesn't get brought up enough. He was averaging 25 to 30 points there for 5 years or so. So he was definitely another really good player from the 80s.
You have another guy you want to bring up, Rex?
Well, talking of Harden and that type of offense, Adrian Dantley.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the actual mid-range monster. I mean, his mid-range shooting is actually the highest all time by far. He's many percentage points above anyone else. He was slow-footed though. Couldn't really jump. One leg's longer than the other. He had stuff dealing with there. So maybe against the more modern athletes, and this is something. Thinking about this was something I was going to mention, but we ended up going a really long time doing the comparisons between eras with 5 guys. But where I think the real difference is between 30, 40 years ago and today is it used to be back in the quote unquote old days, your bench would be filled with the best basketball players, but guys that were lesser athletes. Your coaches would always save the bench for the guys that knew how to play the game, but weren't quite as athletic. Because when they put them on the floor, they wanted them to not make mistakes. And if they put them in up by 6, when they do their 2 minutes and come out, they want to still be up by 6. So you put in, your bench was filled with guys that were a little bit shorter, a little bit less athletic, but could play the game. Had very solid fundamentals, understood how to play the 5-man game, understood defensive rotations, how to keep their position, how to box out. That changed, and they started finding these rough gems. And really, I think Hakeem was probably the first one. That they started finding these rough gems. Guys like Hakeem, Pippen, Rodman. And you started to see a turnover where when they upped the number of teams through the expansion era and they upped the number of seats on the bench, they started not giving those bench seats to the guys that knew how to play but were a little undersized and a little under athletic, to let's give it to these crazy athletes that we think, because every coach thinks they can teach to anybody. So we're going to take these rough guys, these raw guys that can jump through the roof and run like gazelles, and we're going to teach them basketball. So that's what they started filling the bench with. So when you look at it overall, the casual fan goes, oh, well, players today are so much more athletic. the players that are being selected to sit the bench are way more athletic. Jokic, Doncic, these guys are not more athletic, okay? They're basically the same as Larry Bird. It's you're filling your bench with athleticism now, hoping that of the 6 guys on the bench, 2 of them you can teach how to be solid contributors, and maybe one every 2 or 3 seasons will become an all-star caliber player if you're lucky. That's what they've gone to, as opposed to guys that were just phenomenally skilled but were 5'10", or a great position rebounder but was only 6'7". Those guys are no longer, those guys are in the G League or overseas now, when they used to be on the bench. Now the emphasis is get athletes in there, and we can teach them how to stand in one spot and hit a 3. And that's been the, in my opinion, the de-evolution of the game.
Yeah, we were talking about this once, and I kind of said, I think the way I put it was, they used to select for basketball players, and if you were athletic, that was a bonus. And now it's like they filter for athletes, and they're hoping to kind of teach you 1 or 2 things along the way. More in the later processes of where you should, and Akeem is a rare guy who started playing at 15 and just picked it all up, right? They're hoping to find guys who are athletic and teach them 1 or 2 moves or 1 or 2 responsibilities, and hoping that their athleticism can make up for the rest of the things they can't do. And there's cons and pros to anything, right? But I agree with Rex that it used to be, I want the best basketball minded players, and however they are however athletic they are on top of that, that's a bonus, or that's nice, right? That might, athleticism might separate 1 or 2 guys who are roughly the same basketball minds, right? And now, and I kind of want to make a video on the current state of AAU. I need to do some research on it, but there's like a big complaint right now that the AAU's just picking good athletes, good players, and they're just throwing them on the floor, and they're just saying, get yours. And, there's not a lot of ball movement. There's not a lot of strategy and thinking and, situation management and things like that. So yeah, I definitely agree with Rex on that. That's definitely been one of the big evolutions the last 20, 30 years is we want just pure athletes, right? And I think the overall quality of the game has gone down a little bit, maybe more exciting, but I think definitely the quality of the game for people who really love basketball, it's maybe, the basketball skill team aspect has definitely gone down a little bit, I think.
I want to talk on that too, because I brought in this guy up and these other guys too. But Nerlens Noel was projected as a number 1 overall pick. He had tore his ACL in college, but he was going to be number 1. I'm not saying that didn't have anything to do with maybe his career, but he was in the media going to be projected for number 1 just for his pure athleticism, and that he was a shot blocker in college. What has he done after that? He's not done much in comparison to being a number 1 projected number 1 overall draft pick. I believe he got picked 6 or 7 after the injury. He was still a top draft pick in that draft. What I know him for is putting blunt guts and Gatorade inside toilets before he moved out. That's about the most memorable thing he did for at least the Sixers. Then another guy is Markelle Fultz, also projected to be a freak athlete, and he was picked number 1. And it's just, what did that turn out? I mean, at least he's still in the league. I think he's doing okay in Orlando right now. But in comparison, TJ McConnell also drafted to the Sixers, or actually picked up because he went undrafted. But he is still in the league on the Indiana Pacers, being a productive bench player, actually doing things that are effective, particularly in comparison to Nerlens Noel. But it's funny when you watch him play, he just looks like an all-heart guy. Like, his legs aren't as long as these guys. He looks like he's like a little roach, like running like this in comparison to everybody else. And it's, but he, based off of his basketball skill, is still in the league. And I feel that a lot of guys, what I've observed, are ignored for their basketball talents and are picked off of these projections that often come unfounded, particularly, in my opinion, due to a lot of these guys' attitudes and will to actually be there, versus a lot of the skilled basketball players that have put in more work to be as good as they are in the game of basketball, even if they have some less athletic ability.
Yeah, and real quick too is, Rex probably definitely agrees with this, but it also used to be, this is why I get so mad at players like Dwight Howard and James Harden. It used to be in the off season in the summer, right? You would pick up one or two things, right? Or you would work on one or two things. You would add one or two things to your bag, and people would see it the next year or two down the line. They would see you implement that, right? And there's still guys like that today, but I think about guys like Dwight Howard and James Harden, and their games have just not evolved. Like they're just getting better at the things they already were good at instead of picking up new things and sort of evolving their game. I feel like that's kind of gone away a little bit too. I don't know. I don't have any proof to back that up, right? That's just my feeling that guys kind of just play, and what they're good at, they just kind of keep getting better at. And I feel like we don't really see these big like evolutions in guys' games over a 2, 3, 4 year period, right? I mean, even LeBron got a little better at his shooting, right? But I mean, what is he really? What like has he really gotten that deadly 20-foot turnaround that no one can stop or anything like that? No, he still is just kind of a step back three or to the hole guy, right? And I just feel like that too is something we don't see a whole lot of, where a guy will come back after a summer or two and they're like, wow, he got a left hand. Or, wow, he got a hook shot, or wow, I haven't seen this center shoot a 15-footer before, and he shot in 5 this game. I've never seen that before, and he made 3 of them, right? So that's another thing. I feel like guys just work on these drills and they just get better at what they're good at. And I feel like we don't see guys really evolving their game. Even if you don't have to be the best at something to pick it up, but just be good enough at it, right? I feel like that's something too I don't see a whole lot.
What do you have to say about that, Rex?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's Stern. It's what Stern wanted, and it's what Stern got. Is he wanted to focus to come up for marketing to make more money. He's like, our players don't wear helmets, they don't wear pads and everything. They're out there in a tank top and shorts. Everyone can see their face. Market the players, and when you have players that have grown up in a team atmosphere, like the players of the 80s, they grew up with a team atmosphere, the atmosphere of the 60s and 70s, which was what the team does is what matters. Then they're put in the 80s as the first generation of the look at this player. Then you get the Magic, what I call the Holy Trinity. You get Bird, Magic, and Jordan. That's the first generation. Then you get into the second generation. You get the kids that grew up watching Bird, Magic, and Jordan doing their thing. The Iversons, the Kobes, the second generation, where it's more of a me. And then the secondary priority is the team winning. The team's winning, but my game, me, is the factor. Now your third generation in. The whole team first attitude is completely gone. Like Nick said, the AAU, where you're every camp, every tournament, you're on a different team. You hop around, different teammates. It's just show off basketball. It used to be show off basketball was for the playground because they didn't keep tabs, right? You could be on the court for 6 hours. You could win 5, 6 straight games, sit for 2, get back in a 5, get back on the court. At the end of the year, no one knew what their win-loss record was. There was no trophy. You worked on your individual game on the playground. When you got on a school team, or if you weren't at that level, if you're younger, a league team, church league team, whatever, it was about the team. It was team during the season. Then when you play outside on the playground, yeah, it's about you. You do what you want. Now the NBA has become the pickup ball. It's because they get paid so much money. We're not talking rich. 40 years ago, they were rich. Now they got generational wealth. And it's all off clicks. It's not off people sitting down watching the game on CBS on a Sunday. Those days are over. It's about being on here, clicking onto these YouTube channels, getting clicks for all these highlight videos on NBA.com and ESPN and all of that, getting your little 15-second commercial and getting paid, and then going on to the next one. That's where the money's generated. That's where it goes. It's shoe sales, it's merch sales, and you're not buying, you're buying player's jersey, you're buying shoes with a player's name on it, and it's all about the individuality. Basketball is no longer a team sport. It's not. And that's why I can't stand it. That's why I don't watch it, although I've been trying to watch it these past few weeks to speak more intelligently on these shows. But it's the true game of basketball is dead. The NBA has killed it, and it won't come back because there's too much money involved in individual players' personal interest. That if they average this many points a game, or if they have this poster dunk that can be shown all over the internet for 3 or 4 weeks, they're going to get some kind of endorsement out of it. And they will. And that's it. There's only one way to bring back old school team first basketball. And it's never going to happen. But there's only one way of doing it. And that is changing the pay system so only the winning team gets paid. Then you'll start seeing some ball.
No, I agree with you. I'm going to shut it off here. Do you guys have any last words before we get out of here?
No, I've been holding back coughing fits for hours now.
Well, check out Politicus Rex. Subscribe to his channel and NMB Sports. Rex has some great playlists. Nick has some great content. But go check them out. It's been fun. I want to thank Pierre Lynch for that super chat, JaredK.com, Josh, amongst others that have come through here. Thank you all for participating in the live chat. Jibs, thank you all for coming. And again, thank you for coming, you two. Pierre, it's too late, man. I got to go. I know you're just coming in here now, but I had the lines open for a while. But I appreciate you coming. And yeah, and for everyone, Michael Jordan fans are the best.